Hello and welcome to the DraftKings Daily Trot. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Scott Mailwig at Sports 25 to Life, and we're talking about tonight's slate, of course. And there's some cheap pitchers that aren't too bad today, but unfortunately the Coors game is in the morning. So if you're one of those people who likes to go cheap pitcher and stack Coors, today is not the day for you. But as we're looking at the top pitchers, there's some interesting things about all of them. You got Madison Bumgarner against Atlanta, which is now missing Freddie Freeman again, back on the DL. Only problem is they don't strike out a lot, and Bumgarner has had some struggles at times recently. Six earned runs in 2 of his last 5 starts. Was solid in the other ones, but hasn't been pitching as deep as you'd like him to for his current price. I think for me, the top option, if I'm paying up for cash games, is going to be Matt Harvey against Miami. How about you?
Yeah, I'm up there too. I'm not a huge fan of Harvey just because he's really inconsistent, but I definitely think he has the best matchup. He's tied for the biggest favorite on the board with Hutchison today. Speaking of, that's my cheap pitcher today. If you like going with cheap starting pitcher 2s on DraftKings, I like Hutchison quite a bit. I think Harvey's far and away the highest upside guy. I don't really even think it's close, honestly. Yep. I think cash game wise, you could consider Cueto a little bit. Cueto's been pretty good. Detroit's offense has been a little down since they got rid of Cespedes, and with Cabrera being out, I think it's finally starting to catch up with them a bit. Ian Kinsler was carrying him for a while, and we knew we couldn't do that for very long. So I think Cueto's an interesting cash game option, but I definitely agree with you that Harvey's the biggest upside guy on the board. And Bumgarner is not bad at all. He's a solid cash game option too. Like we mentioned, Bumgarner also big favorite. Atlanta, really the only concern there is the same thing you said. They don't strike out a ton, but Bumgarner is good enough that he can strike out anyone a decent amount if he's on that day. So there's a lot of upside there too as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And as far as middling options, I'm a big fan of Taylor Youngman tonight at $8,300. Mm-hmm. That San Diego offense has just been terrible. And, I mean, this kid's been very consistent. 3 of his last 4 starts with 7 strikeouts. Really the only weakness he's had has been walks, 2-4, 3-2 over his last couple, but hasn't allowed a home run any of his last 5 starts. Had a complete game against the Dodgers, who we know the best team in baseball against right-handed pitching. So yep. Certainly a lot to like about this guy, not a lot to like about the Padres offense. So I think $8,300, he's certainly my favorite middle-tier guy. And then you mentioned Hutchison. I think he's a fine play. He's pitched really well at the Rogers Center somehow. And Minnesota's the worst road offense in all of baseball. So a lot of good things going for him. You expect he'll get a lot of run support. But then the guy everyone's talking about today, of course, is Luis Severino. Only $4,600, top prospect for the Yankees. We know the guy's been dominant in the minor leagues. Obviously, it's going to be tough for him in his first start against Boston at Yankee Stadium. But we know the guy has huge upside, and he's $4,600 tonight.
Yeah, and he's also minus 200 favorite. Yep. I have 5 guys as a minus 200 favorite right now, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I remember when it was hard to get to that total as a favorite, but Vegas has just gotten so good at projecting winners that they have to get it up that high now to get people on the other side of these lines, which is pretty crazy. But, I mean, there's nothing that you can argue with there at 4,600. I feel the same way about him and Hutchison. I think Severino's definitely got more upside, though. I mean, we know Hutchison's not a great pitcher. Severino has a real good chance to be. I mean, he's facing a little bit tougher offense today. Obviously, the Yankees' offense isn't quite as good as Toronto. So, I mean, Hutchison has some factors working for him, but I think Severino is definitely the GPP upside guy you want.
Yeah, I completely agree there. And as you're looking at other options here, there's not a whole lot that really stands out. I mean, St. Louis does struggle against lefties. David Holmberg's only $4,400. I'm really only playing him if he's a guy I'm pairing with a guy like Severino or Hutchison. Yeah. Just because he's cheap. But, I mean, even then, you go with 2 of those guys, you couldn't even spend all your salary if you wanted to all the way down the board. I mean, they're just way too cheap. One other guy, Brett Anderson's a huge favorite. You mentioned the minus 200 favorites. He's a huge favorite against Philly. They've been hitting better recently, and he hasn't been great. But at $6,700, I don't think he's a bad SP2.
Yeah, I don't think so either. He's another pretty big favorite here. I have him at minus 180. He hasn't been very good lately, but he's definitely a solid cash game option against Philly. There's a couple other GPP options I would look at. If Scott Kazmir has a ton of lefties in the lineup for Texas against him, I think that's a pretty solid play. Kazmir's held lefties to a 257 WOBA over the last 2 months. He's been really strong against them. I know some of the Texas lefties hit lefties pretty well, like Odor and Prince Fielder, but I think that's a decent GPP play there, even with the big over-under. He's going to be really low-owned, and like I said, has been really good against lefties this year.
Yeah.
The only other guy that I'd really consider, Dan Herron at 6,800. In a new situation with the Cubs offense behind him. He's an interesting guy, not a huge upside guy. He doesn't throw hard enough to strike people out anymore, really. But, I mean, he could be fine in terms of giving you 6 innings of 2-run baseball with 5 strikeouts or something like that. But it's not a big upside thing there, and I think there's a couple better cash game plays, honestly.
Yeah, certainly. And then now we're getting a lot of the chalk plays. Catcher, we know the Yankees have a monster favorite on the board tonight, so 5-run team total in Vegas. Brian McCann, $4,300. Going to be a pretty popular play, and for good reason. They're in a good spot against Stephen Wright, knuckleballer, who just has not been good at all recently. Jason Castro is a nice tournament play at $35, but my favorite cheap guy tonight is going to be Wellington Castillo, only $2,900. Hits lefties very well, and Gio Gonzalez has not been great against righties, allowing almost a 330 WOBA this season. So, and Wellington Castillo's been hot. I mean, the guy's got 6 home runs in his last 6 games. So, definitely a guy that I'm loving in tournaments for that cheap price tag.
Yeah, definitely. Couple other guys that I don't mind for cheap. David Ross, he's hitting 6 or 7. He's a flat 2,000. He's had a pretty good career track record against lefties. Luke Roy, I think, is okay against Ian Kennedy, although I don't love him. The only concern with McCann is I think he had a leg injury he was dealing with at the end of the game last night, so I think he's questionable for today, which, if he's in the lineup, he's far and away my favorite play today. So I definitely agree with you on that, but that's just something to keep an eye out for.
I mean, you can certainly play Buster Posey up the top. We know how, I mean, he's expensive, but like we mentioned, there's a lot of cheap pitching options that are decent tonight. So if you want to go Buster Posey, certainly don't blame you paying up for him at $5,100 tonight. First base options, there's quite a few. Of course, Mark Teixeira, most expensive, rightfully so. Same story with the Yankees. You got other guys. You got Paul Goldschmidt at $5,000. We know he crushes lefties. Gets Gio Gonzalez. He was a fine lefty, but certainly Goldschmidt in play. And then probably your chalk cash game play, I would imagine, once again, is Adrian Gonzalez, way too cheap, $3,900 against Aaron Harang.
Yeah, I mean, I was in that same position yesterday. I played him yesterday. I'll probably play him again today. He's just too cheap with the upside he has against weak righties. And, I mean, he's got, it looks like 23 career bats against Harang, and he's hitting .435 with a .480 slugging percentage. So that's a big enough sample size for me to feel good about that. Not that I really needed it with Harang being on the mound. He's not a guy I don't target in general. And at $3,900, I mean, the only problem with him is he's going to have a massive ownership percentage. So while that's probably good in cash games, if he has a weak day, but I just don't see him not having a nice game here, and I'm going to have him a ton. Other guys at first base, there's not a ton that I like in this like mid-range. There's a couple guys a little bit lower that I don't mind. The Colorado guys, I think, are both okay plays depending on where they're slotted in the lineup. That's an early game. Sorry about that. Ryan Howard is an interesting guy to me against Anderson at 4,000. I don't think he'll be very heavily owned, but Anderson has not been very good against lefties this year, even though Howard has a worse split against lefties. He's an interesting GPP play for me. There was one other guy I had. Justin Smoke's in the lineup again at 2,600. He hit 5th last time he was in the lineup, and he's been pretty solid against righties. Duffy for Minnesota, not a guy that scares me either, and 2,600's cheap enough that I would look at it at first base, but it's going to be hard to pass up Gonzalez.
Yeah, definitely a real cheap way to get exposure to those Blue Jays tonight. Second base options, you've got Ben Zobrist, probably my favorite play there up at the top. I know you love him. He's $4,500 expensive, but gets Matt Boyd, who in his last start, before he played for Detroit, gave up 700 runs without getting an out. So certainly KC, a team that you could be considering tonight. Howie Kendrick at $4,100 against Harang, but for me in cash games, it's going to be Neil Walker at $3,400. Just way too cheap, hitting from the left side of the plate tonight.
Yeah, definitely. I think those are my two favorite guys. You've got to always consider Gannett as a cheap option at $2,700 if he's hitting leadoff, which he has basically every game, I think, since they traded Gomez and Parra, yeah. So I'd expect him to be up there. Eventually he's going to jump up to $3,500 like he should be, but While he's at 2,700, you got to consider him in most of these matchups. Anthony Rendon started to look pretty good last night. He's still too cheap at 3,300. You can play him at second or third and feel pretty good about it, I think.
Yeah, and Cesar Hernandez at $3,000, still just far too cheap. I mean, he hasn't been a guy with a lot of upside, but he's just been a consistent performer at that price tag. I mean, he's hitting doubles, he's stealing some bases,
Yep.
scoring some runs, so I like him quite a bit as well. Third base options, Josh Donaldson, if you can pay for him, you got to like the matchup against a rookie and Duffy there. Going to be tough to pay for him, though. Miguel Sano, if you're not playing Hutchison, the guy's got a ton of power, but hitting righties a lot better than lefties. But I think the guy that you really want here is going to be Alex Rodriguez at $5,100.
Yeah, he's pretty hard to argue with. I mean, the Yankees are probably my favorite stack tonight. Rendon, like I mentioned, is the cheap option here. Outside of those guys, there's not a ton that I'm really excited about. I mean, Matt Carpenter's facing a lefty today, even though he's been hot. I don't know how good I feel about that now that he's back up to 4,600. Maikel Franco is a guy I like quite a bit at 4,300 for GPPs. I don't think Anderson's pitching well, particularly right now, and that's why I like most of these Philly guys. He's just been struggling, leaving too many balls up in the zone. And Philly's offense has been quite a bit better over the last 3 or 4 weeks here.
Yeah, and one more guy you can consider. It's not a good matchup. Kazmir's been really good against righties, but Adrian Beltre, as we know, lefty masher throughout his career. Seems like he shows up with these big performances when you least expect it. So I think I'll throw him in a couple GPPs tonight because he's cheap, and we know obviously he has upside. We hit for the cycle, what was it, 4 days ago? So guy certainly has upside. Speaking of upside, there's a lot of it at shortstop. You got Troy Tulowitzki, still seems to be underpriced at $4,400. Not quite the obvious play that he was the other day when he was $39, but still at $4,400, not a bad price at all. Carlos Correa, righty-righty against Nick Martinez, who struggles against righties. He's in play, but $5,600, pretty steep price tag. There's plenty of other guys I'd rather play. And then Johnny Peralta is going to probably be your cash game play for the most part. $4,000 gets lefty in Holmberg in Great American Ballpark.
Yeah, Peralta keeps getting underplayed against lefties because, I mean, his overall numbers, like batting average and stuff, don't look great against him. I mean, a 343 WOBA is solid, but it doesn't scream must play like some of these other guys' numbers do, like when you see Donaldson face a lefty or something like that. But Peralta's got a 279 ISO against lefties this year and a 34% hard hit ball rate, which is just insane. So, I mean, if anything, he's getting unlucky against them right now, and he has been for a while. So, at some point, he's going to come around. Holmberg is a guy that, I mean, we don't really know what he's going to bring to the table, and, I mean, Peralta could have a huge game here.
Yep, absolutely. Another guy who's cheap, kind of been in and out of rosters all year long, but now leading off most nights. Jimmy Rollins, $3,300. Talked about Aaron Harang. You want to pick on him a little bit. So I think he's probably the cheapest I'll go at shortstop unless I play Cesar Hernandez, who's $300 cheaper. Nobody really standing out to me as far as really cheap. Anybody really cheap that you see here?
Really cheap guys? No, not really. Almost all the cheap guys that are on the board today are hitting pretty low in the lineup. I guess Jose Iglesias is the one guy I would consider at 2,900. He's been hitting second, but he's facing Cueto, so it's not really anything I feel super good about. I mean, the lowest guy I'd probably go to besides him is Jimmy Rollins at 3,300. He's sitting at the top of the Dodgers order again. I mean, I don't really love it again, but I mean, that's a price you can play him at when he's sitting at the top of the order.
Yeah, certainly. And then outfield, Bryce Harper is one of the best hitters in the world against righties. Just so happens to be that Ruby De La Rosa, one of the worst in all of baseball against lefties. 17 homers allowed, 405 WOBA this season. So Bryce Harper probably gonna be a popular play because it's not easy to or it's not hard to have a lot of money left over by the time you get to the outfield. So he's a popular play. But my favorite swerve off him is Lorenzo Cain at $5,100. Crushes left-handed pitching. The guy does it all: stolen bases, home runs, hits for average. I expect Kansas City to put up a big number, and he should be batting third in that lineup tonight.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's a great play too. He's been looking pretty good over the last few games here. Not a lot else at the top I like a ton. I don't mind a small Arizona stack of some of these righties against Gio Gonzalez if he struggles, but that's more of a GPP play.
Yep.
I kind of feel the same way about the Dodgers outfielders at their price. They're quite a bit lower, but I don't feel particularly great about them despite them facing Harang. I like the guys that are left-handed in their order quite a bit better. Evier is probably the one that I would get into my lineup a little more often for $3,000. Preston Tucker is a guy that's probably going to be pretty heavily owned again today at Texas, facing another righty that gives up a decent amount of home runs. He's under 4,000 still. It's the same story with him basically every day. He's in a great spot now with the speed hitting in front of him and stuff. It's just that whole Houston lineup just looks better and better every day.
Yeah, I mean, that's a terrifying offense, so I like that call. A couple other guys, Randall Grichuk, big-time upside, $4,400. You got to like him as well. Of course, all the Yankees outfielders, whoever you want to play, whoever you can fit, you certainly want to get your piece there. I mean, Beltran, the cheap one there. Another guy I really like is Dexter Fowler, $3,900 against Jeff Locke. Jeff Locke's just not a very good pitcher, and Fowler's the guy, much like Lorenzo Cain, but not quite as good. But a guy that can kind of do it all. And he steals bases. He hits for power. I like him quite a bit at under 4K tonight.
Yeah, there's a lot of cheap outfielders I like today, actually. That's where I would probably try and save money. You were mentioning it's easy to get there with a ton of money to spend, so I think some of these cheap outfielders will be under-owned, and it's going to make a lot of sense in like GPPs to go 2 top pitchers because like Kristen Orfia is hitting second against lefties for the Cubs right now. He's 2,100. Johnny Gomes, he's facing Bumgarner, but not only has he been pretty good against good lefties on the year, he's also 7 for 10 against Bumgarner in his career, and he's flat 2,000.
Yep.
You can actually get the 3 and 4 hitters for Atlanta against lefties in your lineup for 4,000 combined because Adonis Garcia has been hitting fourth against lefties, and he's flat 2,000 too. We talked about the Dodgers guys. Jeff Francoeur is another Phillies guy I like against a lefty in Anderson. He'll probably hit cleanup. He's 2,600. There's a ton of value at outfield today.
Yep.
So like I'm gonna have a lot of GPP lineups with like probably Cueto and Harvey, stuff like that, and just you can still spend up on like Tulowitzki or somebody at shortstop and just go really cheap in the outfield in some really good batting spots.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And then Darren Ruff's another guy from Philly, $2,100, hits lefty as well. So yeah, I mean it's going to be a fun night for GPPs. It's going to be an interesting night for cash games because there's really no. I mean, there's some obvious plays at a few positions, but there's really just no obvious play at pitcher or plays if it's DraftKings. So it's going to be real interesting to see some ownership tonight. Those are the nights that are the most fun, I think, because no one likes the nights where everything's chalk.
Agreed.
All right, that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DFCafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out Colossus, our optimizer, and a lot of great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.